Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Tuesday, April 5th, 2016. The time is 2:02 p.m. and we are ready to begin this briefing meeting. First on our agenda today is reports to board members from our advisory committee chairpeople, and we will begin by welcoming Mr. Richards from the Construction Advisory Committee. No, you're not, Mr. Richards.
I hope not.
Just please state your name when you get to the podium. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Molly Scott. I am the Vice Chair of the Construction Advisory Committee, speaking on behalf of Mr. Richards this afternoon.
Thank you.
We had a meeting in January right before this briefing, so I'm going to be talking about February and March, our February and March meetings and agendas. In February, we were, as a committee, provided with two different sites, blind sites. Mr. Snell had given us a blue site and a green site to evaluate for the new LLL High School. And as a committee, we were given pertinent information on those two sites, student data, proximity to different things. We had basically a matrix of information and site development costs, things like that. And we blindly scored those two sites, not knowing which was blue and which was green. We took those back, each individual member took those back and evaluated those using the matrix we had created last year when doing the Tower Road, Three Oaks Parkway site evaluation. So we went and did that on our own, and then in March we came back and the scores were reviewed, and it was determined that the committee unanimously chose the blue site, which was the Imperial Parkway site. Based on all of the scoring criteria that we did, the Imperial Parkway site had more points. So as a committee, we decided to go forward and make the recommendation to the board that since that was the site that was unanimously chosen by us, that we would then recommend that site to the board for the high school. We were shown a graph of each site of what the building layout would look like on those sites and how the buildings would fit. And we were given a construction schedule by Mr. Snell, basically for both the sites, the construction schedule and everything that would be on task if each site was chosen. And our next meeting is tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So at this point, I'll take any questions you have.
Great. Board members, questions? Mrs. Morgan?
What is on your agenda for your meeting tomorrow night?
Our agenda for tomorrow. You know what? I did not print that out, but I can get that information to you. Debbie did give it to us today. I did not print it out. Mr. Snell, do you happen to know?
It is a review process of our RFQ system.
Key review process.
That's great. That was the question I was going to ask, when that will come up. Terrific. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you. Mrs. LaRiviere, any questions?
No.
Well,
Thank
thank you.
you.
It sounds like you've been working
Much.
diligently. Thank you very much. Next, we have my favorite committee, the Continuous Systemic Improvement Advisory Committee, and representing that is Mr. Brian Rist. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you. As stated, my name is Brian Rist, and I chair the Continuous Systematic Improvement. It's my privilege to update the school board and the staff on the progress of our committee. Our team had 3 regular meetings during the first quarter of 2016. At each meeting, we had an agenda was created to examine some of the issues confronting the school system. These topics have included so far inclusion, school assignment, the use of technology in the classroom. At each of these meetings, the staff has arranged a presentation by a staff specialist whose job it is to focus on the relevant topics. During our February meeting, the committee was given a presentation on the history of school assignment and its current status. Information was provided on the original reason that school choice was created, how the current system works, the number of students currently being bused, the estimated costs of the overall transportation operations. It's anticipated that school choice or school assignment will be a major part of our year-end report with our recommendations. During our March meeting, we focused on the use of technology in the classroom, more specifically Chromebooks in elementary schools. Staff members provided information on some of the criteria that led to the decision to select Chromebooks. A detailed explanation was given that highlighted the different platforms that are currently utilized. Staff shared some of the benefits and focuses towards the collaboration that the Chromebook platform makes possible. Staff shared some of the costs, challenges that implementing the Chromebook brought on. I took away from the presentation that the following conclusion is that although there are many challenges of using technology in the classroom, the benefit far outweighs in returning to the conventional system. Technology in the classroom will likely also be a part of our year-end recommendations. I would like to thank the superintendent office, the school board for creating our stakeholder group. On behalf of every member of our committee, I'd also like to thank the staff, the staff members who have taken their time from their very busy schedule to help us provide the information that we'll use to give you guys feedback to the board. I've served on many boards and countless committees, but I'm not sure I've ever been involved with a more committed, passionate, and focused group of professionals than the ones that I've met through this committee. By taking part in leading this committee, I've learned a great deal more of the very many challenges that you all face in operating our school system, and I compliment you for assembling such a truly professional staff who wrestles with some very difficult decisions almost on a daily basis. And I look forward to speaking to you at the end of the school year. At this time, I'll take any questions you may have.
Board members, any questions?
No, not at this time.
I like that. You guys have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you. And I
you.
just want to say thank you for your leadership on the committee because you really keep things moving.
It's
Appreciate
nothing
that.
to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we welcome Ms. Patty Lochner for the Curriculum Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, school board members, Superintendent Adkins, and Mr. Martin. We've had 3 meetings, but actually I only had time to write up 2 because the last meeting we had was right before spring break, and there was no time to do anything. So I will give you a little update on what went on at that meeting too. In January, we had 2 great presentations on one was the items that have been placed. We have a parking lot on the wall, and if people have questions that may not be on the agenda, but things that could be just researched and looked at for people to put comments or what they want to find out information on. And so what we did in January was to go through those parking lot issues and put them into categories and where we wanted to be. And then Mrs. Robery provided updates on 2 parking lot questions. And you have them in your minutes or the report there. Beginning with 2015-2016 fiscal year, which is this year, each district school board shall use at least 50% of the annual allocation for the purchase of digital electronic instructional materials that align with standards, and I think we have done that. And most publishers now provide electronic materials and resources that support the print resources. And then instructional staff for media centers was a question that was on the parking lot site. And since April is National Librarian Month, I thought this was a good place to put this in. And the number of sites, media specialists, instructional staff, and professionals at each, and I have that listed in the report that I gave you. Well, actually, it's in the minutes, and I can go into those if you want me to. In February, we had 2 great presentations, one on standards-based intervention and enrichment with teacher leaders at Manatee and intervention support specialist contact at Orange River, a PowerPoint for the elementary level of standards-based intervention and enrichment. And then TIF teacher leaders from Mariner Middle presented a PowerPoint for the secondary level of standards-based intervention and enrichment. And many positives have come out of both of those intervention and enrichment programs. As a matter of fact, a couple of our curriculum people that are on their school SAC committees went back and said, why can't we do this here? Well, the schools that are doing it are Title I schools that have the extra money to be able to do it, so which they did not realize at the time. So as you can see, many positives have come from those enrichment programs. And they have a program at Mariner Middle called ZAP. where students have the opportunity to work on skills and classwork until it is completed. And they hold workshops for parents to learn more about school standards and their child's achievement, which is a good thing too. And it would be nice if we could do that in every school in the district, but unfortunately, sometimes it's a monetary issue. And knowing what the legislature does to our money coming down from the state, case closed. In March, we did talk at the February meeting about what Mariner Middle was doing. And so in March, we brought forth a motion that we commend the standards-based intervention and enrichment work showcased by representatives of Manatee, Orange River Elementary, and Mariner Middle School. As a citizens group, we were extraordinarily impressed with the accomplishments of these schools in promoting student success through a strong and competent use of assessments and resulting data. So we are paying attention, listening, and like what we're seeing. And I know in a lot of instances, it's Title I schools, hard-to-staff schools that are getting the extra money to do these kinds of things. Forgive me, I'm out of breath. I've got some other family issues that are pressing on my mind right now. At the March meeting, we also had a follow-up on the intervention enrichment, and that's where we brought forth that motion, and it passed. And then we looked at the textbooks for art, music, and digital information. And I was pleased, especially for art and music, to see what they were doing, because I have a vested interest in that, and that's how I was raised, was by a music teacher. And then I looked at the digital information book that they have approved and that you all are going to use, and I'm going like, where was that when I needed it? Because learning technology, as an old-timer, sometimes they change things before I can blink, and then I'm going like, how do I do that? So, but we have had a good committee. We've had people in and out all year, so it's hard for me to keep track of who's who, but we're learning more about each other as each meeting goes on. And I thank you, and the March report will be included in the final report for this year. And it's been a pleasure to serve, and I also appreciate district staff, Brandy Macchia and Melissa Robry for their help, and Mrs. La Riviere for her help as the board liaison. And thank you. Any questions?
Board members, any questions, comments?
No questions. Patty, thank you for your leadership of the committee, and thank you for tapping me whenever you need to.
Oh, most welcome. One other thing, our April meeting will be the Standards of Excellence, which is April 18th, in Essential Standards and Fun. I only taught kindergarten, I can't read. Foundational skills. And Dr. Atkins will be presenting that, I hope. He's been contacted about that, and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Lochner. And now from District Advisory Council, Ms. Cindy Crosby. Hi, Cindy.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Atkins, members of the board, and Mr. Martin. I'll just keep this really short and sweet. Since our last update, we have had 2 meetings, February and March. In February, each meeting we always have the board update and the assistant superintendent update, which is something we kind of just added in the last couple meetings, and it's a great thing. There's been great reception to that. I think that the members of DAC like to hear what's going on in the superintendent office, and since we can't have Dr. Atkins every meeting, we have Soretta Ralph, which we really are appreciative of. In the February meeting, we had a great presentation by Mark Mora about the new high school, the different data between the 2 sites and things like that. And then we had a presentation by Dr. Pruitt about teacher recruitment and retention, which was very interesting, brought up some good points, and the people seemed very, very receptive to that. I mean, there was a lot of things that you just don't know how there's so much negative in the media about the teacher turnover and everything. So it's great to know that the school district is really working on trying to recruit great teachers and retain them. In the March meeting, we heard from Dr. Amy Desimores about the finance and budget, which was also a great presentation, and then from Dwayne Alton about Chromebooks and technology. It sounds like they've made great strides. I know when it rolled out for middle school, it was a little difficult. A lot of the training perhaps wasn't there as early as the parents would have liked it to be, but it seems like now they've already started training the high school teachers, and that answered a lot of questions that the high school parents had based on having middle school students. So that was a great presentation. We have a couple things that we're still working on. We're trying to tweak the breakout group report so that it's user-friendly and functional and doesn't get bogged down in the minutia that's going on in those breakout groups sometimes. And then also working on keeping the breakout discussions at task. This is a parent forum, and a lot of times it gets a little too bogged down with staff and teacher-related topics, and the parents and the community would like to keep it to their topics, not get down to the school employment. Thanks. Any questions? Sorry, I come on my lunch hour, so I'm trying to get.
We appreciate it, for sure. Any questions or comments?
No, I just thank you for giving up your lunch hour.
Oh, it's no problem. I enjoy chairing the committee. I didn't plan on chairing the committee at the beginning of the year, but I have enjoyed my time chairing it, and thank you for all your support, especially the board and Soretta.
You're very welcome, and we appreciate you. Thank you. Is there someone here from the Equity and Diversity Committee? I don't see Mr.
Yes,
Oh, there
ma'am.
you-
I'll be representing Joe
Oh.
Ryder this afternoon. Good
Okay,
afternoon,
thank
board
you.
members, Dr. Atkins and Mr. Martin. My name is Mark Moore. I'm the district liaison to EDAC. Joe Ryder passes along his regrets that he was unable to attend this afternoon. He was called upon by his job. So this afternoon, I'm going to present to you the meetings and the outcomes of all the 3 meetings that we've had during the third quarter for the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee. The first item that we have for continuous discussion at the EDAC meetings is the district's 3-year strategic student assignment plan. One of EDAC's major purviews as an advisory committee is to ensure equity and diversity across our district, especially in our schools and the way we assign students. So we've brought several drafts of that plan to them for their input. In particular, during this quarter, we talked about programming and services in the elementary schools and ensuring that we provide equitable access to programs and services that parents desire in those schools. This was something that we'll continually have discussions with that particular advisory group because they offer some key input and guidance as far as equity and diversity going forward. Another topic that we discussed, and again, this was something that we looked at last year, is the Lee Virtual School. That's of great interest to that committee. Basically, EDAC's interest is diversifying their enrollment and as well as expanding their scope to address at-risk students, especially those that are in jeopardy of graduating. They feel as though that particular program might have a solution to that issue and improve the school district's graduation rate. At that Lee Virtual School presentation, we had Mr. Joe Patura, who is the assistant principal of that particular school. He presented EDAC with information regarding the virtual school. He explained the differences between Lee Virtual School, the Florida Virtual School, as well as what homeschool offers our students. He talked about the types of enrollment. We have part-time and full-time enrollment in that school, and the traits of successful virtual students. He also talked about the difference between the traditional brick and mortar teachers that we have throughout the district and those that work in the virtual school system. He also talked about requirements to complete online courses, the growth and challenges that the virtual school has, and what the future and vision is for that program in our district. The third topic that we talked about was the high school graduation rate. We had Dr. Itzen visit. He does that on an annual basis, and he provides an update on the district's high school graduation rate. EDAC looked at the data that was presented and still has an ongoing interest in addressing the gap between minority and non-minority graduation rates in our district. Their interest also is assisting the district with developing strategies that will ensure students are progressing towards graduation, checking them early on and not waiting till their senior or junior year, but looking at them as soon as they get to high school, what their challenges might be and what programs we can put together in order to ensure that they graduate on time. The last topic that was discussed during this quarter is high school LLL, site selection and recommendation. As part of board policy, the site selection goes through EDAC as well as the DAC and the site selection committee for the district. During that meeting, we had the Construction Advisory Committee Chair, Ryan Richards, provide EDAC with an overview as well as the assessment that CAC did for both sites. And EDAC eventually unanimously voted to recommend Imperial Parkway as the future site for high school LLL. The future meetings for EDAC include Minority Instructional Administrative Recruitment Plan, minority instructional recruitment incentive packages, retention of minority instructional recruits, and the NAACP school district rezoning. In our next meeting, it'll be our last meeting of the year, we will be discussing the recruitment plan. I'll open it up to any questions.
Questions?
No questions.
All right, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then our Finance Advisory Committee, Mr. Scott. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'll keep this brief, kind of to the point. You received all these documents already, but the current goal of the committee is to make the committee as effective and as efficient as possible. To that end, over the last couple of years, we've adapted, this year, we've adapted a new format that allows us to vet several topics at one time. Currently, this quarter, for example, we're currently vetting 6 different projects currently at the same time. This is because we're using 3 separate committees. Those subcommittees are divided up into 3 groups. One is the Cost Reduction Committee, which is headed by Carrie Perrone. And the next is the Regulatory Change and Effectiveness and Efficiencies Committee, which is headed by George Fox. And then there's a Revenue Generation Committee that I head. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about that for just for a little bit, because I think it's made a big difference in how the committee has handled itself and the great group of people that we have working with us. We have as our board liaison, Ms. Morgan. We have Mr. Tubb there and his staff that helps us gather the information. And I can tell you that I think we're happy right now with the amount of input we've been able to provide the board with on a moving basis, giving coverage of many topics that we have been able to broach in the subcommittees. I think we have a good team. We allow these adults to do what they do best, which is manage these small teams and prepare many white papers. And what happens at the end is we get the group together and debate it. And if we think it's a good enough idea to bring to the board, then we give it to Ms. Morgan and we go from there. Currently, the subcommittee we have on cost reduction is reviewing operational audits by the district. Currently, they're also reviewing processes to reward or incent employees that bring cost-saving ideas to the school system. We're also looking at how to reduce food costs, and we're analyzing currently the 2016 versus 2015 costs that are involved. The Regulatory Committee is doing a copious job and in-depth job of looking at transportation cost savings. So in March, I think we invited Mr. Robert Morgan from District Transportation to field questions and give some insight to the committee. And on April 6th, tomorrow, we have Mr. Mark Morrow, who's coming in to answer questions regarding the student assignment in the 3-year strategic plan. On the Revenue Generation Committee, over the last 6 or 8 months, we've been quite active with the naming rights and for the schools. I think that's a great opportunity for the school system. We noticed that the school system and the board has divided it into 2 groups, the physical naming rights and the digital naming rights. We would love the board not to lose this opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity to create evergreen income for the school system if it's managed properly, and we'd be happy to vet it even further if you'd like us to do so. The other area we've been working at quite diligently is to bring a student-centric foundation to the school system. I know there's a school system, a foundation that's currently that works with the school system today, but it is primarily a teacher-based foundation. So we've been gathering information, and with all willing, within the next 2 or 3 months, we'll have something to present to you that we think is a worthwhile plan for the betterment of the school system and the students in the county. With that, I'll end it, and if you have any questions, please ask.
Mrs. La Riviere.
Just a question or a thought. A couple of questions. Do you meet in separate rooms? Okay, so if I'm seeing that two subcommittees are meeting on March the 16th, do they meet together in the same room, or do they separate so that?
We've had input from.
I'm just trying to think ahead for if any other committees want, that's where my brain is going, so.
We'd love to, if you want to, they can come visit, they
I'll
can come
come
watch.
visit.
And we operate with Keith here to try to operate within the guidelines. So currently, we're operating in the same room so
Okay.
that the sunshine laws aren't violated.
Yes, yes.
So we operate in the same room. At the end, we take notes from every committee, and those are all recorded and put into our logs. So we try to do it as professional as possible
Right.
within the guidelines of the committee rules.
Oh, that's great. And then, just this is a suggestion.
Sure.
It might be good for the Revenue Generation Committee with regard to a student-centric foundation, is to invite Marshall Bauer or someone from his office to discuss what they have do currently for students, so that you could see what components are in process, so then you could plan what could complement.
Sure. I welcome, that's a wonderful suggestion. We actually, over the last year, have made that invitation several times.
Well, we'll see what we can do about that.
Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, I just want to compliment Will again
you.
on his leadership and the committee as well, because they are excited and they work hard at what they're doing, and some things come forward and the committee says, you know what, that's not something to take to the board, that's something to take to another committee, or it's something to take to the board. And I have to say that the payoff from the work that they have done on the naming rights has been enormous, because there's already interest in the new high school, and people are able to be out in the community talking about opportunities to donate money to the high school for naming rights. So this group has worked hard and been enormously successful this year. So
Thank you.
thank you very much.
When's the next? Oh, April 6th,
Wednesday.
Wednesday, tomorrow.
Yes.
What time?
4.
I'll see if I can do that.
Yeah, the other thing is, all the committee members are all passionate. They give their free time, they come here, they're all passionate about their own thoughts, but one of the things we put on the table is that we need to put that aside, our personal views about things, and act as a group for the best interest of the kids in the county. And they've done an awesome job of that. I love our team, and we hope to deliver as much as possible to the board.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Stein.
thank you for the honor to serve. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to comment that I really like the idea of the subcommittees, and I want to thank you and your other members for your commitment and your willingness to serve, because we value your input greatly. Thank you.
I'll make sure they hear that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now, finally, we have our 2016 legislative review. And our lobbyist, Mr. Bob Sarah, is with us today from Sarah Consulting Group. So without further ado, welcome, Bob.
Thank you for the opportunity. John and I are both so very proud to represent the district and the board during the legislative session and for our term with you. Before we get into the review, there are just some folks that need to be thanked. Certainly, Mrs. Fisher for her role as the legislative chair on behalf of the board. She provides us very important feedback on what you want as a board. The superintendent and his cabinet, if you saw what some of the requests were made of his cabinet, the timelines, the deadlines, in order for the responses to be effective, and then the quality of the work that came back, Very much appreciated. It's very impressive. I could try to list all of the names of the folks that had to respond in that way. It's the usual suspects, and you would be very proud of them to see what they accomplished. Also, our delegation this year, I think when we get into the nuts and bolts of the session, there are certainly things that we're not excited about, but for the key issues that we came up and asked for consistently, we had 4 different groups that came up and passed through Tallahassee over the course of the session. A group of school administrators, a couple groups of school board members, and the superintendent came through. Each time we essentially asked for 3 major things, and our theme stayed consistent. And we recognized early on that there were some legislators who saw the class size reduction implementation for public schools of choice, and that they wanted to cull that down or eliminate that special standing. Obviously, with Lee County's school assignment plan, that is a huge issue for you, and it was worth, in the year that it passed, I was told that it was worth $15 million. So that was a huge issue. We were able to avoid having that to pass. We have known for years about the effort to have the legislature mandate a sharing formula of the local property tax millage. And while we believe that the Constitution bars the legislature from levying that millage and also bars them from spending that millage, there was a huge push to accomplish that this year. And while it never came to a vote on the House floor, I would suggest to you that one of the reasons it did not come to a vote is because of members of our delegation working behind the scenes. But the way you can't see it or point to it because it did not happen, but I'd suggest to you that our 4 members had an important role in that issue not getting voted on this year on the House floor, and that. Now, certainly we had an ask as it related to the operations budget, and we were hoping to get at least the Senate's floor budget of a 2% increase per student, and ultimately they settled on 1%. And there are reasons that happened. It is still more money than was funded last year, but because of some of the expense increases that you will experience, whether it's in the Florida retirement system or other benefits or in other areas, certainly that 1% increase will not go very far, and we'll look at that as we get into the presentation. So from this point, we're going to get a quick session overview. We'll look at the education budget and particularly the local impact from 50,000 feet. There was one major education bill that passed. There were about 30 separate member bills that passed as part of that package. Then there were about a dozen very minor single interest bills that passed, and we'll then look ahead at some of the work that will occur here in the future in this legislative arena. So the session overview, each session has 2 or 3 issues that take on a life of their own and seem to define the entire session and every decision that are made. And this year, the issues were tax cuts, a proposal for an economic development quick closing fund, and the Seminole Compact. And the governor really put each of the 3 issues on the table early on in his proposed budget and in his State of the State speech. He asked the legislature to consider $1 billion in tax cuts. He wanted a $250 million economic development quick closing fund. And he asked for an increase for the public schools that was in excess of 1.6% per student. In the mid-session, we didn't really have a resolution of the tax cuts or the economic development fund issues, but what we were seeing as far as the public schools budget was the House bumped up the governor's number by a very small percentage, but it's still millions of dollars. And the Senate, bumped it up a little more, where the range between the House and Senate, between the House, the Senate and the governor, which was the high mark to the low mark, was about $100 million difference, which is a lot of money statewide. It would have been worth, $3 or $4 million more for you in your budgeting process. But as we got to the end of session and we got into the budget conferencing process, the tax cuts that the governor proposed in largely corporate tax related plans got shifted over into a reduction of the required local effort, which of course is one of the primary funding sources for the public schools. And the result of that is that the tax cuts are broad-based, and many of the citizens will see those directly rather than them trickling down. But they didn't shift all of the general revenue to make that, to retain the floor budget amounts that they had proposed, whether it was the House's level of 1.75% per student or the Senate's level of 2% per student. And so they shifted about $428 million, $450 million, give or take, of the tax cut proposal that the governor had into the RLE reduction, and ultimately we ended up with 1% per student as the increase. The tax cuts, there ended up being over $500 million of tax cuts, but largely it was the required local effort reduction that created that delta. And the governor's proposal for the Economic Development Fund was shelved. And further, the Seminole Compact, which was one of the issues that, sort of loomed over the entire session, they weren't able to bring that in for a landing either. And so there are going to be some issues that will be resolved in the courts, and we'll see how that progresses. So for the education budget, we see a minimal increase. It's mostly earmarked. There is significant property tax relief. The 1% per student increase on average statewide, and the thing about the average is if we took my weight when I was starting college and my weight today and took an average of those, it would be a very healthy weight. It has no bearing on the reality. It has a bearing as far as statewide policy, but certainly it's much more important to us what happened to us locally. There are minor formula changes. A formula change that was done last year on a one-year basis only, which was the federally impacted students, which largely impacted districts like Brevard that had NASA, was made permanent, or at least it was permanently put in the statute. The digital classrooms allocation saw a $20 million increase, and that increase will be distributed by doubling the district base amount. So each district will start with $500,000 from that allocation, and then the remaining money in that pot will get distributed on a per student basis. We would have been better off if they had done it on the per student basis, but that was the decision that was made. In the supplemental academic instruction, the statewide policy for 1 year is that they have an increased pot of money, about $52 million, that will follow the workload increase for the schools that are required now to do the extra hour of instruction based upon being one of the lowest performing 300 elementary schools on reading. The thing about this is that the list of schools will float and change this summer based upon the testing that hasn't occurred yet. But while that mandate has been there and has been unfunded now for 3 years, now in the 4th year, they're at least partially funding that mandate, and we will, that is an improvement on the whole concept of an unfunded mandate. At least they're providing some of the funding. For the ESE guaranteed allocation, there was a major policy change, and what it essentially was while total education funding was restored to the high water mark of 2007 last year. The ESE funding lagged about 15% behind where it was in 2007. The Senate made it a priority to get back to or as close to that high water mark within the ESE guaranteed allocation as they could, and they put more than $90 million into an increase for the ESE guaranteed allocation, which based upon their formula of how that worked, on a total dollars basis, they now have that in the neighborhood of what it was in 2007. It doesn't actually meet it on a workload level for that group of students, but at least we're to the total. So that was an important policy decision, that we weren't going to restore the education budget and not fully restore the services within the ESE guaranteed. And there's an additional policy change here because about a fourth of the total increase statewide is now in this allocation. Typically, this allocation had been frozen at the point that the legislature made it. And that would be your number for the year. And if workload changed, that would be figured into the next year's budget for the legislature. This time, they're going to allow the October student count to change that allocation one time, and then it will be frozen there. That's important because the legislature's estimate of workload isn't always 100% accurate. It can't be. It's a guesstimate. And with so much of this increase being in this pot, we want to make sure that the dollars are actually following where the workload occurs. So on a one-year basis, the October count will determine where those dollars actually go. The Best and Brightest program, which was somewhat controversial, was continued and extended from $45 million to $49 million based upon a workload that existed last year and the expected growth in that program. And the funding for the school uniform policy, that if a district has a school uniform policy district-wide, there's the opportunity to receive up to $10 per student for that. The base student allocation only went up $6.26, which is 0.15%. The BSA is important because this is typically the number that most closely relates to how much flexible money is available to the board and the superintendent to build a budget moving forward without making cuts in order to create the pot of money for policy changes that you might want. The total funding increase is now on average $7,178.49, which, as we said, was an increase of 1%. And the total potential statewide is now over $20 billion, and the increase is 2.33%. And the delta between the 1% per student and the 2.33% in total funding is your workload of students. The local impact, we saw funding of, we're above the statewide average in funding per student. We're slightly below the average in the increase percentage. We receive 0.76% as an increase for what your total potential is next year as compared to what it is in the current year. And for capital outlay, this was another area that was very important for traditional public schools. The legislature provided $75 million for renovation, maintenance, and repair. And for charter schools, they provided $75 million. And one of our arguments in this area has been, while we're not advocates for that $75 million for the charter schools, at least that money reflects districts that are charter school friendly end up bringing more state dollars into the county for that policy, as opposed to the sharing of the local millage becomes a zero-sum game where the districts that are not charter friendly don't have to share anything because there aren't any charters there. So that is one way for the folks that are charter advocates to do something where given the fact that this board has been very charter-friendly and you have about 13% of your students in charters, this is a way for them to bring money to the district and improve the economy here and support the public schools in general. So local impact, the local funding increase year over year was a little more than $18.8 million. But $13.8 million of that is growth in students. $1.1 million is the FRS rate increase. And there's they've earmarked extra money for the extra hour of instruction, but that is what you'll spend it for. And at the end of the day, there's a little more than $1.2 million available in this budget as growth funding. And just, to see, just to do an increase for teachers, and I'm pretty sure that that number is instructional personnel and not just classroom teachers, is $3.4 million. But and that's the budget. So looking at the major education package, as we said earlier, over the course of the session, about 30 separate bills were thrown in together. And one of the portions of this bill was this parental rights and student choice portion of the bill, which Senator Benaquisto was the prime sponsor of. And the impact of that will be minimal here in Lee County, but this was where the fight between the House and Senate over the class size reduction implementation issue bore its way out. And the House took a position, and when they passed the standalone bill of this issue, that they were going to eliminate that special standing. Senator Benaquisto and her office assured me that she was not going to allow that provision to come out of her bill, and that it would pass the way that we needed it to. And we really appreciate that, because if that was worth $15 million, and if you saw on the slide before, the total increase year over year was only a little more than $18 million, obviously that was a huge item.
Yes.
And we appreciate her support on that issue. That was very important. But this part of the bill says that starting not this coming school year, but in 2017-2018, if a school has capacity in any public school in the state, including charter schools, if it has capacity and a parent wants their child to go to that school, then they have a right to go to that school if it has capacity. The school boards, and this was an important part of the bill as well, the school boards define what the capacity is of the schools. They are supposed to consider a number of different factors in doing that, but at the end of the day, whether it's class size, whether it's the programs in the school and so forth, the school board decides what the capacity of each school is. So that's one part. Parents also have a right to request teacher transfers, and they don't have a right to receive a transfer or to request a specific teacher, but the district must respond to those requests within 2 weeks and provide a reason why it was granted or not granted.
Okay.
As we said earlier, the class size penalty reductions were retained in the method that they were for public schools of choice. There is a new fiscal transparency reporting requirement that is created, which in some ways is designed on a per school basis. The DOE is going to come up with a methodology for how we have to determine how much money is spent at that school, and then you divide by the number of students and report that. It is designed to bring in some of our capital expenses and to show them as a per student expenditure. The athletic transfers in most cases are going to be legally authorized. As long as there was no recruiting involved, if the student wants to go to this program because that program is the best one, they want to treat athletics as though it's just as much of a choice program as any other program that we might have academically or otherwise. Transportation within these choice options are the responsibility of the parents. So here in Lee County, the vast majority of public school choice will still be conducted by your student assignment program, and then this will get overlaid on it afterward, where if for some reason, and the most of the transfers that will be impacted for Lee County would be students that are either in Lee County that want to go to a school that's outside of the district, or students that are outside of the district that want to go to a school in Lee County. Because within the district, if a student is assigned to a school through the student assignment plan and they prefer to go to another school that has capacity and they ask to go there and it has capacity, you already have methods within your plan that would allow them to go there, and if you assign them there, to receive transportation. But most of that is, of course, within the zones and subzones, and this would allow students to also leave the zones and subzones. There was a provision that related to school board member associations that essentially says that if there's a certain amount of dues for a board to join the Florida School Boards Association, and one board member doesn't want to join, then the district can only spend 80% of that amount. If it was 3 out of 5, they can only spend 60% of that amount. It's the only not-for-profit in Florida that has a special requirement as to how its membership dues can be levied. There was a provision that dealt with school board powers and duties that was intended to make sure that school board members had the right to go to visit schools. The way it was actually put into the bill, it might actually require the board to visit schools as a board. So we'll see how that pans out, whether it's fixed in a year, and certainly I think you'll get some legal advice on what you have to do with that over the course of the next several months. One of the benefits of having done session 2 months early is that we're done 2 months early. We have a little bit longer to figure out how to implement things that may not have been perfectly done. There were a number of provisions that related to charter schools, and unlike almost all of the other charter school bills that have passed over the last 17 or 18 years, this one is very balanced. There are many things that recognize and respect the responsibilities that you have as a board and that the district staff have, and there are certainly a few provisions that are slanted towards the charter schools. The applicants for charters have to disclose all of the key people and providers that will be working with that charter school and all of their histories with previous charter schools and failures that might have occurred, financial issues. They have to disclose that, and we're finally allowed to consider all of that in the application process, where if there is someone that has been involved in multiple failures, whether it was for financial reasons or academic reasons or otherwise, you can consider that as part of the application for the first time. It allows charter schools that are approved 2 full years to open, so that they can deal with site issues and capital issues. It prohibits for the first time students to be dismissed from a charter school based purely on academic performance. A traditional public school cannot do that, and so this is now a provision for charter schools where actually what they're doing here is we hear so much about parent rights and student choice, but the choice up till now has largely been if the charter wants to serve you.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not, certainly, most charters weren't doing that, but there were a few charters that were dismissing students and getting their grades that way. It allows the charter board to voluntarily close at any time. So the contract that says they'll operate, if they realize that they're going to have problems, then they have the right to voluntarily close. It for the first time, requires that a charter school have a Florida location in order to qualify for the state's funding for charter schools, which was an interesting provision. It provides that charters have a legal remedy with cities and counties if they are treated unfairly in their site planning, where they're treated differently than others. They have some legal remedies and the ability to recover attorney's costs in certain circumstances. This was one of the provisions that was heavily weighted towards the charter schools. The district must timely fund the charter schools even if you have not received the funds yet. So essentially, we
Extending credit to the state.
will float loans for some of these charter operators that hasn't existed for the first 17 years of this, but will exist now.
Wow.
The requirement for high school graduation that all students obtain at least a half credit or take a half credit course at a minimum online can be solved in an alternative method. It's very limited. It's for students that go specifically into very technology-oriented courses and or obtain a credential via a online assessment, certain types of credentials in some of the CAPE technology fields, but that was a slight change there. The charter capital outlay formula was changed slightly, and again, this is only for the $75 million that the state provided for the charter schools, but essentially there's an additional weight for for schools that specialize in serving students that are economically disadvantaged or that have a high percentage of students that have disabilities. They would get a little bump within that formula and get a little bigger share than those that are just serving traditional students. On the charter school capital outlay, the Senate for most of session was floating some language that would have limited the ability for charters when they receive that capital money from the state to spend it in ways that led to self-enrichment for the same folks that were on the charter board and were running the corporation and so forth. There was a lot of debate about those proposals, and there were a lot of things said on the floor of the Senate that I never thought would be said publicly. And while the language came out, those types of speeches tend not to go away. So that part of the language was not adopted in the bill. And then there were some charters that the DOE became aware of that were using waivers that existed from providing the full hours of instruction, particularly in high school, that were intended for emergencies. When a high school like Charlotte High School had to go on a double session because of Hurricane Charlie, they were given a waiver from providing the full number of hours, and they were still receiving full funding. There were some charters that set up and that essentially used an all-day schedule where students were coming in at different times, called it an experimental calendar, and received and reported full FTE even though they were not providing the full number of hours. Essentially, now if they provide 90% of the hours, they'll get 9/10 of an FTE funded. There were limits on school district construction based upon comments that the House came up with that school districts had vastly overspent on capital outlay, on the student station caps that existed.
Excuse me, Mr. Sarah, Superintendent
I'm
Atkins
sorry.
has a question.
Just a couple questions. One, just back to the voluntary closure by charter board. Just help me out here with, if you could provide really an explanation as to how is it different now with the changes that have been made versus previously? Because you remember a few years ago when we had a number of charters that just felt that, oh, well, we can't operate for financial reasons and we're just going to close. And for those students and also for our district, that puts a hardship. So I just, I want to know if this is making it even easier for them to close than it had been at that point in time. I think that was, what was that, like 2 or 3 years ago? We had just a number of them that just closed.
I would say that it does legally make it easier because, you know, right now otherwise you have that contract and that charter that might establish a different process. It does require them to report different things to you, to provide student records and different things to try to have this transition, but where, you know, typically we might be in a different circumstance where obviously if they continued operating for 2 or 3 months and they were right and they couldn't make it and they couldn't pay their bills and they couldn't do these other things, and that also leads to different kinds of problems. I'm not suggesting to you that this was certainly one of the provisions that was more slanted towards the charter industry. It lets them off the hook and they can just say, well, this contract that we had with the district, with the school board, and the responsibility that we have for these families, we can just unilaterally absolve ourselves of it. There is a process in it. How that compares to what we went through, I think previously we would have relied on things that were in our charter, and now this will be the process. I think what we would see if we were to do that comparison is they largely codified what happened to us, but it's now in the law and it becomes, they certainly have a legal basis to do this, where before contractually they were supposed to operate and they just shut down and we had to deal with that aftermath. But they actually had contractual responsibilities that they decided not to fulfill. At the end of the day, de facto, I don't know that it makes much difference. I mean, but legally now they have some standing to do what happened to us when they didn't have the legal standing to do it. It still happened. So, and then the other way is, you know, if they were filing financial reports and were showing the deficits and all that kind of stuff, then we would be forced to close them down, and it might take 2 or 3 or 4 months. But, you know, the net result is still not what any of us want.
Right. I just want to make sure it wasn't going to become any easier. It sounds like probably similar to this.
I think at the end of the day, I'm willing to sit down with Dr. McCullers and look through the specifics, but at the end of the day, I don't know that it's going to be much different, but now there's a legal status to it, where before it was something they did, and we could probably argue that they really didn't have the right to do that.
Okay, the second question, you mentioned about the self-enrichment language, you know, the speeches don't go away. Do you anticipate that will come back up next year or not?
The primary senator that made the speeches, Senator Gates, is termed out, but the kinds of things that were said don't go away, and I do think that there are senators who will remember those speeches and will bring them back, you know, so that it becomes a little bit of a hedge against some of the very aggressive attacks on the local millage. But whether, you know, this has been a long-term battle, and at some point in time, unless things change, the momentum is going towards that.
Okay, thank you.
So as it dealt with school district construction costs, there's going to be 2 studies that are done, one by the economic development folks of the legislature, where they're going to study the existing cost per student station statewide and make determinations about whether that number should be raised or lowered. And a second study will be done about the SREF, which is the school construction code, and make comparisons to the normal building code, look at where those differences are, and try to fix costs to those differences, and to determine whether any of those things can be changed, where the money can be freed up without student safety being impacted. And primarily, the biggest item where student safety is not involved is all of the requirements that revolve around emergency shelters. if they shifted that responsibility to other local government and their facilities rather than school boards, who we're not the, emergency preparedness agency primarily, but we fulfilled this role. That is one of the biggest areas where we could save money, where student safety clearly would not be impacted. In addition to the 2 studies, when the studies are completed and the numbers are fixed, the law will now say that if you exceed the cost per student station, then there'll be 3 years that you can't share in any state PICO money for public schools. And the limits will apply to all sources of funding. Previously, if you did a local referendum or a sales tax that the citizens approved, then those were not counted within those limits, and you were able to frame those within whatever it was that you marketed to the public in the referendum. This suggests that in projects that start after the period of time that the studies are completed, that they will apply, that new number that will apply to all revenue sources. In the law, there was language that said that starting next year, funding would be adjusted based upon the number of students that failed the Algebra 1 EOC. And it has been on the books for several years, but it wasn't going to take effect until next year, and those provisions were deleted. The real impact of that change, it helps our planning, our budgeting and planning folks, because the federally connected student supplement that was created during last session for the first time and was only in the implementing bill, so it was only going to happen for 1 year, was codified where now it is permanent. For auditory oral education programs, these are programs for students that get cochlear implants. They have special matrix weights that are added where those students will be level 5 students for the period of time that they're receiving this specialized instruction on how to hear and talk. There was a change to voluntary pre-kindergarten where parents that had previously delayed entering their child into VPK for a year were then not eligible for VPK, funded VPK the following year. They could pay for it themselves, but they were otherwise told, go to kindergarten. They've now fixed that where parents can decide to delay entry into VPK and still receive that funding for that year. For Florida High School Athletics Association, there were changes made to eligibility, and primarily if a student starts the year at a school, they are going to be eligible at that school if that is their student assignment. There are some changes for when transfers occur mid-year. If the season for a sport has not started yet, then they're also, if that's a legitimate transfer, then they're going to be eligible to play in that new sport. Within the same sport season, if they've played for one team, they transfer in the middle of the season, they're not going to be able to play that sport in the midseason unless they're one of 5 disadvantaged groups that exist for folks like students that have parents in the military, students that are in foster care, and different things along those lines. There's a handful of exemptions that are spelled out. There were penalties attached to coaches and district employees that are involved directly in recruitment violations, including and up to and including reports on their teaching certificates to the DOE. But there were fines and other things that were possible, and these penalties ramp up with each successive violation. There was a provision that dealt with youth suicide prevention training for schools. This was championed by Senator Benaquisto and Representative Eagle. That provides voluntary training on suicide prevention that schools can decide to participate within existing professional development requirements. It's not additional hours required. There was some provisions relating to school district construction flexibility, where 4 minor areas of SREF can be waived if the board holds a special hearing and outlines what the benefits are. These are very minor adjustments to SREF that deal with things like having some graveled parking lots, not having covered walkways in certain circumstances. You have to outline what the costs are and review that student safety will not be impacted by the change. And but there's limited flexibility involved there that might save some money on the new construction that we need. There's a provision relating to reemployment of instructional personnel, which specifies what we believe the law to be already, where if you are rehired after retiring and you had a professional services contract previously, you are not entitled to receive a professional services contract when you come back after fully retiring. This was related to an issue in Orange County where a hearing officer ruled the other way, but we believe, and in no other place has it been ruled anything other than this was already the law. There's some provisions dealing with notifying students and parents of the right not to participate in the pledge and under what circumstances, and how we can notify them if we wish to specify that we can do that within the Code of Student Conduct or on our website. And a seal of biliteracy was created for students that don't just take a couple of foreign language courses, but take 4 foreign language courses, get a certain grade point average, and demonstrate mastery. And so that was a new program created. Those were just some selected provisions of that education package.
Too big.
So there were a few other bills that we'll just spend a minute talking about. The Florida retirement system rates were established in House Bill 5005. The rates went up slightly. It will cost you $1.1 million. House Bill 183 makes it easier for teachers that are on a temporary certificate in a STEM field to get a permanent certification. They can avoid having to take additional course requirements if they obtain a highly effective rating in one of the years that they're on the temporary certificate. So if they're highly effective as a starting teacher, then they can get a permanent certification. They don't have to go finish the coursework. House Bill 229 deals with bullying and harassment policies. It makes minor changes to how you're supposed to build those policies and the things you're supposed to consider as you build those policies. And then it says that at least once every 3 years, you'll review your policies again and renew them. The House Bill 2030 creates 3 pilots to around persons that have severe autism, and particularly that have a problem of wandering, where they're going to use some of the tracking technology that exists and see if that helps to eliminate cases of children or adults wandering off and not being found in time. The House Bill 287 deals with the Principal Autonomy Pilot Program. This program is a 3-year pilot. There were a handful of districts that were specifically named. We're not one of them. The schools that were participating the principal had to be given specific autonomy from the school board policies that existed, and even from the union contract in certain areas dealing with personnel and other things. And for that additional autonomy and responsibility, that principal would they would have the ability to waive certain laws and rules within that school, but only for that 3-year period of time. So that was adopted. Senate Bill 350 deals with procurement procedures for educational institutions, and it largely will require districts to review some things that exist on state contract before we go into one of our own purchasing processes. Senate Bill 436 deals with threats of terror or violence. It's in response to some of the email threats that have gone out, we're going to shoot up the school, or there's a bomb, and it increases the penalties for making those kinds of threats. House Bill 585 deals with hospital and homebound students, in particular students that are receiving services at a designated children's hospital, and it's designed to try to speed up when they're receiving instructional services, how long it takes for them to receive instructional services. Senate Bill 672 dealt with educational options, and what it primarily did, there were 4 programs that were slightly changed or expanded last year through the budget and the implementing bill, and it largely made those changes permanent for the personal savings learning accounts, the personal learning savings accounts, the John McKay program, for some of the transitional services that are provided to adults with disabilities that are in post-secondary programs. And also, this is where they did the school uniform, continued the school uniform policy where there's extra funding available there. The policy is really the same policy that we're living under right now. It's just it's put permanently in the statute. There's not a sunset in the statute. House Bill 1305 was a bill that Representative Eagle was also involved in, dealing with emergency allergy treatments in schools. And what it does is it extends to private schools and charter schools. They're added to the list of groups that are able to buy bulk epinephrine without having a prescription in advance. And then finally, House Bill 1367 deals with competency-based education pilot. Again, there were a handful of districts that were named in this pilot. We were not one of them. This is one of the movements that certain folks are looking toward for the future, where particularly in high school, rather than focusing on seat time and a course, you're focusing on mastery of certain standards and demonstrating them in some ways, typically through assessments. And if those assessments are, if those competencies are demonstrated as mastered under whatever timetable they are, the student moves on to the next set of standards. And it's trying to research how to fund that type of situation, because it could both lead to advanced movement for some students, and for other students it might mean that they move more slowly than our current, timetable for the way we structure our courses. They're going to do that in a handful of districts and a handful of schools. There's some funding around the research for it, and at some point in time, there are folks that want to see if that's something that can be expanded. So that's certainly something that I recommend that our folks monitor. Yes.
Yeah, I just have a question about that. How would that relate to what we currently experience with the dual enrollment? Because that allows people to progress, and we pay for it. So will we pay for the rest of
This
it?
is, this could be middle school courses or high school courses, and we will be the ones providing the instruction.
Right.
But it won't be based on quarters and a semester and a year, and we've got to figure out how to report grades. We've got to figure out, there's a lot of things to think through, but primarily there's the funding issues and the cost issues. This won't be us paying someone else, but it is, for the districts that are involved in the pilot, something for them to work through. How, if a student completes 3 courses instead of 1 in a year, are they going to get more than funding for just the 1, or are they only going to get funded for the 1?
Right.
And obviously there's a lot more work for the instructors in getting the student through the additional coursework.
Okay, thank you.
So those were the major education bills that passed. And just to think about some of the things that we're going to be facing looking ahead, obviously we have elections. President of the United States, one of our U.S. senators is up for election. All of the U.S. representatives are up for election, and in new districts for many of them. All of the Florida House members have to run in something that's unusual because of the redistricting changes that were made here in the middle and the lawsuits over districts. All of the Florida senators will have to run again as well. There are already 5 constitutional amendments, 1 that will be on the primary ballot in August and 4 that will be on the ballot in November. For us, our platform development will start in earnest in July and August. We'll start to work on the board's issues for next year. The consortium will start to formalize its platform in September. School Boards Association in late August and early September. After the elections, the legislature will reorganize, as the school board will, in the third week of November. And in March, we'll be back into regular session. So we have a little bit longer of a break because we started session 2 months early. We now have a little bit more time to plan. And while we can also start working on and lobbying the issues that you care about, certainly the legislators, every single one of them has to run for re-election, and so that is going to be a primary focus for them, for those that have any opposition, obviously, as it should be. So I've listed here some additional resources, particularly for the audience. If you want to see the district-by-district runs for how the education formula works, the legislature posts that at the link that's listed there. The Florida School Boards Association produces a really amazing legislative summary book where they have their own written explanations of what every bill does, and organizes particularly that big package bill by topics, even when the bill isn't organized that way itself. And if you want to see actual bill texts with the number, you're able to get those from Online Sunshine. Any questions or concerns?
Okay, board members, Mrs. LaRiviere.
I just want to, it was way back there. I think we probably should have, I didn't know whether to ask the question or not at the time, and I should have. I want to go back. There was a comment you made when you were discussing the capital outlay allocations, and with the traditional schools receiving $75 million and charter schools receiving $75 million. You made a comment, and I probably need just a little more clarification, that districts like us that have been very charter friendly, it will be an advantage to us.
Well, it brings money home. Legislators, often get credit for bringing money, state money, back to their own district. The charter schools last year, in the current year, they were funded at $50 million for capital outlay. This is an increase of $25 million. And while we did not advocate for that increase as compared to a sharing of the local millage, which would have been a zero-sum game, reflects instead a bigger pot of money for Lee County citizens to receive educational services from some place.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I got that clarification right. Thank you. That's what I was considering.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, really. You've served us well, and we certainly appreciate your support and your guidance. Dr.
Definitely.
Atkins, did you have anything?
No, I just to say kind of the same thing. I mean, he spends a lot of time, really tracking these issues. God bless you. It would be very difficult for me to do similar type of work, and certainly when you go up there to visit, he certainly gets you to appointments on time and quickly, and I really do appreciate that. I mean, I felt very efficient use of time, and in terms of moving from meeting to meeting, and then a lot of good insight provided in between. So I just certainly appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah. Okay, at this time, we're going to be moving on to executive services. Dr. Atkins, you want to intro or?
Yeah, the next thing that we have on the agenda is salary schedule N. I wanted to give you an update as Dr. Pruitt and Ms. Christensen make their way forward. This is one of the things, they looked at this particular salary schedule, they worked it in such a way that the dollars that are involved proportionally are something equivalent along the lines of what we are bringing forward with the SPALC agreement, but there are some things in it that are unique and I think innovative, and I would like them to share those with you and also be available to answer your questions that you might have specific to the schedule. So having stated that, Dr. Pruitt and Ms. Christensen, take it over.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we just want to briefly talk you through some of the points here in the salary schedule, and it contains many of the same things, such as the additional board credit for the health insurance. It also includes the same type of increase that you're going to see pretty much across the board. One of the things that is uniquely different in this particular salary schedule has to do with the substitute teachers. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit. Now, I know that this is for this year, but in order to start out next year with a new type of pay structure for substitute teachers, we wanted to include it in this salary schedule. And what we're looking at is implementing a tiered approach for substitute teachers. So, for example, even coming in at the what I'll call the tier 1, that would be a small increase over the hourly rate that the substitute teachers are currently making. So that would be to start next school year. And then from there, there'll be the different tiers. And the way it works is that for this year 1, which would be next school year, the substitutes will start out either on tier 1 or tier 2 based initially on their education, and if they are a bachelor's degree and below, that would be tier 1, and a master's or doctorate, they would begin on tier 2. So after that, we spend all of next year determining what tier the substitute teachers will be on the next year. So basically, you spend each working year gaining things to get you to the next tier. And we're still working out some of those details, which is why it's not spelled out in this particular salary schedule. But to give you an idea, there would be things that would get you to the next tier would include the number of days that you actually worked in the year. So that way we're rewarding those substitute teachers that work for us continually. Those substitute teachers that engage in professional development that is not required would be another way that we would move them up in the tier. One area that we're still exploring based on the program that we use to assign our substitute teachers is looking for a feedback process. So the type of feedback that a substitute teacher receives from their job assignments would be another way that we would advance them in their tiers. And then looking at assignments taken in some of the hard-to-staff schools would be another way that you would build that tier. So just because you move up a tier doesn't mean you stay there. So each year you would get reevaluated so that you can't rest on your laurels, so to speak. So we're very excited about that because the idea was to mirror that towards the career ladder concept that we're doing with the TALC employees. And this way, you know, as Mr. Getz always reminds us at every board meeting about, you know, appreciating substitute teachers and giving them recognition, this is a way that we're going to be able to do that is by implementing that structure. So that's really one of the biggest pieces in the changes in the salary schedule. I don't know, Ms. Christensen, did you want to add anything additional? So do you have any questions or?
I just want a couple just real quick comments regarding the work that they've done. I mean, one of the things I think that's important is, you know, certainly it recognizes work experience. You know, the research out there on teaching is quite clear, and I don't think it's a big leap to say that the same research would be applicable to substitute teachers, which is on-the-job training is going to improve their effectiveness in the position. So this particular salary structure rewards that, as well as rewarding the professional development they do, and also it rewards those substitutes that continue to work, don't just work a few days and then drop out, but actually work continuously with the school district. So that is something that we certainly want to reward. So I just appreciate their efforts. They came up with this and presented it to us, and I mean, really good thinking, and just want to compliment them on their work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, questions or comments? Mrs. Morgan?
No, I just want to sort of echo what you said, Dr. Atkins. I love seeing that you're treating this as a professional opportunity. And not everybody can work full-time, and you know, you're acknowledging the fact that they're more than placeholders in front of the classroom, but they really have a role to play in the education of these kids. So I really like what you're doing.
Thank you. And I'm very excited about some of the other changes we're making, putting in standardized handbook for all of our new hires and for all the schools. I'm also excited that this week kicks off our Guest Teacher for the Day project. So we're going to have district staff out in schools this week be taking part of that project. So we're excited about
That's
that also.
exciting. That's great.
One thing before you leave, I know that there was a question that was raised about the salary schedule increase as it relates to step 18. If you would explain that for us, please.
Yes, absolutely. So those individuals who are in step 18 will receive a 3% salary increase in the form of a one-time bonus payment. So similar to the SPALC salary schedule with those folks who are on step 99.
Okay.
And the reason, that it is in the form of a bonus has to do with we're not increasing the span of the step. You're not, adding another step to the salary schedule. You're keeping the salary schedule intact, but this is a way to still reward those employees for a year of service while not changing the structure. The rest of the employees actually step up.
So then would that be repeated annually?
Not necessarily. Not
Okay,
necessarily.
depending on the contract. Okay. I had a couple of questions from employees and other constituents regarding the payment in arrears and the leave buyout. And so for the purpose of better educating the listening audience, could you address that?
Specific question or just in general, or?
Kind of the mechanisms for how the pay in arrears works,
Okay.
particularly as it relates to 12-month employees. And
Right.
Okay.
Right, as it relates to 12-month employees, and then some of the specific questions were, first of all, how much money is the district benefiting by doing this banking, and what is that? So I think people are concerned that they're going to be missing a paycheck.
Okay.
And the difference in the days between paychecks towards the end of the year, it sounded like that had been a concern for some people. They were like, oh my gosh, it's right before the holidays. If we're not getting a paycheck, how are we going to manage?
Let me go through some of the talking points, and then we'll see if that addresses that, and
Thank
if
you.
not, then I can get you some additional information. So basically, this, the step-back idea is the solution that allows us, to get set up for payment in arrears. It's difficult to give that an actual dollar amount, if you will, because the savings really isn't in that so much as it's in the productivity side of it.
Right.
In other words, because of how we're set up now, there's periods of time when human resources cannot process information, and then in turn, there's time when payroll can't, and so it really allows us to improve our processes, which then in turn will result in some financial savings, we believe. And this process is going to take about a 5-month period to capture that and to do it in a way that is least impactful, to the 12-month employees. And it also is going to allow us the opportunity to stay consistent with our insurance coverage and the one additional deduction of insurance premiums, which I think was also a concern for some of the 12-month folks. So that additional deduction is actually being divided over 8 pay periods, so from July 18th through November 10th. So they've parceled out that extra insurance coverage, so it has a minimal impact. And then by November 30th, we will be fully implemented in that payment in arrears. And because there is some concern relative to if, there's more days between receiving a paycheck, and so as a result of that, we knew that might have some impact on staff. So one of the things that was bargained was the ability to buy out their sick or vacation time in order to get some of their own benefit and translate that into financial benefit for them. So they'll be able to take advantage of this buyout for up to 10 total days of combined sick and vacation leave, not to include more than 5 days of sick leave. The advanced sick leave may also be used as part of this buyout. Employees receive those 4 days advance at the beginning of each year, and those will be eligible to be used, because we understand sometimes that staff, won't have that many, so we wanted to make that possible. And then eligible employees will be able to receive payment on 2 dates they can select from, SPALC employees. They'll be able to select either one prior to July 15th if they feel they need some money there, and then again prior to November 15th. So let me kind of put it into perspective for you. So the days between checks are going to be stretched out a little bit. So for example, I'll go each of the pay periods between, in the first pay period, there will be an 18-day, and we can get you copies of this if that would be helpful.
I think we have it, yeah.
18 days, and then 15 days, then 16 days, 19 days, 17 days, 17, 15, 16, and then 20. So the 20 might be the one that you're, might be getting, some folks have been talking to you about. That is why we have that second time prior to November 15th that they are able to do that buyout and get some financial, to assist them. Now, has that helped or?
Well, I'll look for feedback. We got an email just before this meeting started.
Okay.
And the person was saying, well, I don't want to use my sick leave or my vacation time to get money that I should have to begin with. I want to use it for sick or vacation. So, that's where I've been having a little difficulty addressing that. So in essence, the amount of money that they would be less would be the amount that would be withheld on the benefits.
Right, that extra deduction taken for health insurance.
For health insurance,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody's going to be missing
No, ma'am.
2 weeks or a month of
No,
pay.
no. The difference will be that
They'll
we
have to
will
wait
be
longer between
right.
paychecks.
And just for that short period of time from July to November, the middle of July to the end of November.
Right.
And then what would happen is, for example, if an employee's last day is on the last day of the month, they would get their paycheck for those days pretty much right when they're done leaving the district currently. Now, they'll get that paycheck 2 weeks after they leave.
Right,
Okay, because
right.
that gives us time to reconcile. So nobody is ever out any money. There's not money that's being taken away. The only difference for those 12-month SPALC employees is going to be the distance between the paychecks for that short time, and then just that parsing out of that one insurance payment.
Right.
If they have any. They may not have any, so.
Right, and then they'll be getting it later. And then there was just one other question that came up, and I did ask Dr. Atkins this, but someone was concerned because they said that the bus drivers were an exception. And then,
Well-
why were they an exception, and is that discrimination? But Dr. Atkins explained, and this is for the
Yes.
people I know, or I asked them to tune in, that bus drivers have in the past been paid in arrears.
Correct.
So this is not new for them.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate that. And now, do we have one change order? No, we don't need, okay. Okay. Next on the agenda is teaching and learning regarding Chromebooks with Mrs. Falaros, Mr. Alton, and Mrs. Melissa Robery. And Mrs. Macchia. Greetings.
Good morning, good afternoon, board members, Dr. Adkins, Mr. Martin. We're happy to be here today to give you an update on our Global Lee Chromebook initiative. We'd like to start the presentation this afternoon with a video that was produced by our outstanding Lee TV interns, and Paige and Vince are in the audience, so I want them to stand and be recognized. This is amazing. I can't wait for you to see it. They have done an amazing job. This was completely student-driven. They did the entire production, so we're really, really proud of their work. So we're going to start by showing you this video on Global Lee.
Hello and welcome to Lee Schools TV. I'm Vince Marcucci.
And I'm Paige Renhart. As you may remember, Google Chromebooks were recently released into middle schools all across the Lee County School District.
Today we're here at Paul Lawrence Dunbar Middle School, showing you how these innovative tools have revolutionized the classroom. So let's get started.
The first one is the effects of the Great Depression, so list.
Tony Fain teaches language arts at Dunbar Middle School and is a huge supporter of the Chromebooks.
Go ahead and open up our Chromebook.
But she wasn't always such a big fan.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and log into the classroom.
Back in fall of 2015, Miss Fain, along with others, faced the challenge of adapting to new technology.
It was challenging at first, just learning how to take everything I've ever done on paper and put it into the computer. But once I got the pattern and the hang of it, it is so much easier. Everything, I keep track of everything easier. It's easier grading, easier looking at assignments, easier assigning things, everything. It makes my life much easier.
Yes, definitely. Skip right to the questions right now. The main difference between my pre-Chrome life and my post-Chrome life is that the kids actually are becoming more active in the class in terms of helping me with instruction.
Chromebooks have not only provoked student participation, but have also made room for teachers to add their own style to the classroom.
Yes.
For teachers, we have a great deal more choice around content. So instead of following one linear textbook for all the students in the class, the teachers can pick and choose different types of content to deliver.
I can improvise on the fly. I can bring another thing into it. I can take something that someone tells me and make it an assignment and make it an engaging assignment on the fly.
Kids just don't learn the same way. And so in order to have kids learn and to adapt to this technology, teachers have to learn to adapt to the technology.
We've heard from a few middle school teachers and even a district professional.
But what about students? Let's take a closer look to see what students have achieved with their Chromebooks.
I really like the Chromebooks because they've kind of guided us away from textbooks, which is great, but I feel like the Chromebooks are closer to our culture today.
Chromebooks make it fun for everybody else to learn.
And now I can, one click away, I can just submit it into the classroom and I'll be done.
I really enjoy the Chromebooks because everything's just so easy.
When asked whether they would miss their textbooks, they responded,
Not really. I really like my Chromebook better.
No, some people in my class are bookies, but I'm more on the Chromebook.
As the years go on, technology is going to get better and better. So if we get used to the Chromebook now, we'll probably get used to other technologies in the future.
Students have already begun taking advantage of the new capabilities.
I'm in yearbook, and we used to have to go to a completely different room than the yearbook room because the yearbook room didn't have computers. So being that we have our own Chromebooks and computers, that makes it a lot easier to work on the yearbook.
Miss Fain told us how one student goes above and beyond a typical assignment using their Chromebook.
And one student raised his hand and was like, Miss Fain, I just found the coolest video on similes and metaphors on YouTube. And I'm like, what? So he comes over, pops it up, and here is an awesome, like, school appropriate little song that all the classes absolutely adored. So they found something for me that I could use as a resource.
As you can see, the addition of Chromebooks in our district has advanced both the teachers' and students' educational experience immensely.
This technological advancement demonstrates the superintendent and school board's determination in creating a world-class school district. These are all more reasons to love Lee Schools.
Okay, so I was asked to come here today. You know, we wanted to present the video as sort of a status of where we are and some of the things that we've accomplished, and mentioned that we're preparing to roll out for the next phase, which is our high school implementation. So we learned a lot from our middle school implementation, and we've taken those things that we've learned to both improve upon what we're doing in our middle schools and to improve the implementation going forward into high schools. We're moving from, you know, our 18,000 device implementation to the next phase, which is 27,000 in our high schools. And so we will be prepared to open for August and be prepared to roll out the same program at the high school level.
And I'm here to update you on the training plan that we have in place. If you were to, at this time, take a walk to the Caloosahatchee room, you would see approximately 50 to 100 what we call teacher tech leaders in participating in training. They are amazing people. They have done great things as a part of this training, and they're taking the experiences, strategies that they're learning back to their schools. One of the things that we learned from our middle school implementation was how important it was to implement training and provide opportunities for teachers to share at the schools as they were learning. So we provided to middle school and high school teacher tech leaders a class set of Chromebooks to be able to use. So they come in the evening, they learn strategies, and then they're able to go back and apply them in their classroom, which has been a really great thing for them to be able to provide feedback on this worked, and not only provide feedback to the training team, but also to each other. They're really sharing some best practices as they learn, which has been fabulous. We started training for high school in January. We were able to start the training a bit earlier, which has been very helpful. And so the high school teacher tech leaders will go through their trainings, and we actually schedule them for 2 nights, and they're monthly to bi-monthly, depending on what the school schedule looks like. We have provided that opportunity for teachers to select whether they come on Tuesday or Wednesday, because we know a teacher's schedule is very hectic. Many of them have children, and so if they have a conflict for one of the nights, they can come to either night and provide some flexibility for them. We will also bring them together when they complete the school year training, and we have 2 trainings left. When they complete the school year training, we will have a 2-week, 8-day summer training that they will come together and really finalize not only their own learning, but also finalize the staff development plan and support plan that they have for supporting their schools during the full implementation. And they work together as school teams, they work together as a district team to provide feedback to one another about, have you thought about? It really has been a team effort in this development. And I think that Not only have they been learners, but they've been teachers. And I think that everyone who has participated has benefited from their peer and the knowledge and experiences of their peers. So we found that the training sessions have been very beneficial. We're able to get very quick feedback to be able to address any, whether they be technical or instructional questions that teachers have. So we're able to address those right away for teachers and help them as they move forward into implementation. We've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of community groups about Global Lee, and we've gotten some really great feedback, not only from teachers and students, but also from our community members about the very important skills that students are learning, not just technical skills, but collaboration skills, and the types of skills that they're going to need to be a part of the 21st century workforce and to be prepared to go on for college and careers. So we've gotten great feedback from some of our business people about the work that's being done. We have, every time we speak, we have an opportunity to say that we went into this understanding that the most important factor that determines a student's success in the classroom is the teacher. That has not changed. That will never change, in my opinion, being a teacher. What we did want to provide was increased access to technology and the tool, technology is a tool, the tool to be able to provide not only, as I said, increased access, but increased access to resources and instruction for teachers and students, for instructional strategies like was demonstrated on the video. Our students have that. And for many of our students, it has been a great equalizer, I will say. We've gotten quite a few comments about that. So that's our training plan. And Brandy's going to talk to you a little bit about how we're moving forward.
Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the elementary because that's kind of the million-dollar question. So what are we going to do then with elementary? And so, to be honest with you, I kind of have been observing the process. I can tell you where we are with what we know our process needs to look like. We know it needs to look different. We're trying to learn from high school and middle school because at elementary we're going to do it better, just saying. But as we begin to look at elementary school, what they've now taken 2 years to do to implement high school and middle school, we would have the same number of students and the same number of teachers to accomplish in 1 year. So I think at this point where we've kind of landed is that next year will probably be a foundational kind of training year with elementary. We need to spend some time with our principals to talk about what is it that we really need in elementary school, where can this help fill possibly some of the gaps that we feel we're currently having, or does it at all? We also know that next year, and this is where we've kind of begun talking about where does that look, is that there are going to be lots of laptops that will be rolling down from the middle school and high school that will now be able to be moved into elementary school. So we will already be increasing the level of technology that's going to be available even next year. So the starting place I think that we've really landed on is we're going to need to begin to do some training. And then we're going to work with our principals to figure out where that gap is that we have. From there, we're going to really look at, now that we've begun to roll laptops down, our grade levels are different. I know I don't need to tell you, but kindergarten does not look the same as 5th grade. And so while we all know that every year at open houses, they would always surprise the parents when a kindergartner can grab the mouse and click, 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 know exactly what they're supposed to do, much to some of their parents' surprise, that we may need to have different tools or devices for different levels. We may need different numbers that are appropriate. So we're going to start with what are the gaps that the principals identify and then begin to get some feedback from teachers. So what is it that in kindergarten, first and second grade, or maybe it's K and 1 and something different in 2 and 3, what is it that would really enhance your instruction? Because as Melissa mentioned, it's about the teacher, it's about the student learning. So what is it that we could do to enhance instruction, to provide those opportunities and access to students? And we may find that it looks exactly the same K-5. My guess would be we're not going to. But what we are going to try and do is make sure that that training is consistent, so that, as you heard some of the teachers, how easy it is that now I have this video that I can make available, and learning some of the Google Classroom tools, and just some of those basic things that we know we need to begin to train some of our elementary teachers to get that out there while we kind of figure out that plan. So we're really just in the planning phase of, we don't want to jump into something with that number of students and that number of teachers until we know that it's really the right fit for our kindergarten all the way, and in fact even our pre-K, all the way through our 5th grade, to make sure that we're not just getting a Chromebook or getting a laptop in their hands. We're making sure that it's instructionally appropriate for those students. So that's kind of where we are landing training-wise with what we're looking at for elementary school right now. So when people say, where are we going with elementary? Yes, we're going to training. Yes, we know we're going to increase technology. We can't say right now what that looks like. We want to make the most appropriate decision for the students and the teachers that are really going to be using it.
So are there any questions? Oh, Jeanette, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I'm just here to answer questions. I've just completed the mid-year review with all of the middle school principals, and there was a heavy portion of the mid-year this year that focused on lessons learned from the implementation and things that have to be improved upon before we enter into our next school year. So if there are questions, I will see if I can answer them.
Board members?
I've been hearing only positives. So it's been a really good implementation for our middle school, and I'm looking forward to what it's going to be providing our high school students next year, as we have the debate team from East Lee County here visiting us. And
I have loved having you all here today. I just thought,
and I'm sure
for
they're
a,
thinking,
for a lot of different reasons than what you might suspect, but
yeah, and I'm sure they're thinking, ooh, I'm ready to have my hands on those and see how we're going to use those.
I would
Mostly
just tell you,
important
if I
to see
could
how our
say
teachers
one
will.
thing that I've learned from my principals, for all of the angst and concern and questions that they had this time a year ago, that is just not an issue. In just 3 quarters, just in half a year, they're just like a pencil. They are just part of the landscape. They're part of the environment.
That's awesome. That is great. Well, if there are no other questions, we'll say thank you very much.
Thank you very
and
much.
Keep up the good work.
For all of your efforts in providing the training and support for the staff members.
Thank you.
Okay, and now the moment that our high school students have been waiting for. We have public comment. Mr. Martin, will you please address the issue of public comment?
School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this briefing meeting's agenda. The subject of comment is limited to the items on the agenda. The time allowed per speaker is 3 minutes. Ms. Fisher, I have cards for 2 speakers this afternoon.
Okay. Would you call, is there anyone else on the right side of the auditorium who did not sign a card and has something to say? Can you please state your name? Okay, Chris, thank you. And anyone on the left side of the auditorium? Mr. Fox, okay. Thank you. Okay, will you call the first card, Mr. Martin? Thank you.
Jose Antonio Centeno.
Make yourself comfortable with the microphone. Okay.
Hello. Hello. Sorry, I don't really talk in front of a lot of people. Sorry. I want to speak or have a quick question about the Chromebooks, especially for high school students. I was addressed that high school students will take the Chromebooks home. will high school students be able to use their, I know we have a student email. Would they be able to use that email to email their teachers regarding any questions they have towards their homework instead of using their own private email? I know that would be helpful towards regulating emails between the student and the teacher, and that would hopefully transfer information. It will help the student greatly. Would that happen, as far as you know?
Let's go to
Well, I
Sam.
thank you for that question, and I wonder if Mrs. Robery would be so kind as to answer that. That was it? Well, thank you for being here.
Michaela Pabon.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, earlier before, the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee mentioned wanting to increase high school graduation rate. I understand that there's a concern for more students to graduate, but what is like the plan for students who are planning to like go to college? You know, we discussed how important it is for students to graduate, but what are they supposed to do after they graduate? Like students who want to go straight into the workforce right after high school, how would students be able to be better informed about like getting jobs after school and, you know, entering fields that they want to enter?
That's a very good question.
Very good.
As a former school counselor, I'm going to take a little stab at it. At your high schools, you have school counselors, and I think that part of their responsibility is to provide information regarding preparation for not only graduation, but for post-secondary, which could be college, could be community college, could be a vocational or technical school, military, or straight to the workforce. So one thing I would say would be to talk to your school counselor or one of your assistant principals. And the other thing is, you know, we have kids who are in our academies who are getting industry certifications, and many of them are ready to move on to a second phase of training in a technical field, or they are ready to go right into the workforce. So is your question geared to someone who is looking to prepare for college?
And, you know, graduating from college and going to work, but the actual act of paying for colleges. As a senior, I wasn't really, as a freshman, they just said you got to work hard to get accepted into these colleges, but they never mentioned anything about how we are supposed to pay for colleges. Something that I thought would be, you know, an idea to put out there is starting freshmen on sort of applying for scholarships, because there are a lot of scholarships out there for freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors. And I think it'd just be a better idea if students just started working on scholarships now, if college was something that they planned for. I sort of feel that a lot of seniors feel panicked about being able to pay for college simply because of the fact that they weren't prepared for, you know, the scholarships that they have now.
Right. Well, and the schools, many of the schools and our district provide financial aid nights for students and parents. So I'm going to ask if there is someone who wants to add to my response. And I would say to go back to your school, talk to your school counselor, and give specific questions. And there are many scholarships available, you know, if you have the grades. And generally, to apply for those, you have to have at least completed your first 3 years, because they count 6 or 7 semesters. So, and if you leave your name, we'll get someone to help you. Okay, is there anybody who wants to add to that, or no? Okay. Mrs. Morgan?
What about Future Makers? Aren't they going into the high schools and talking about, or bringing the kids in from the high schools? The Foundation Future Makers program? Isn't
I
that?
believe so. I don't have
Okay.
the details on that, but I do believe so. And then also, one of the things that we are working on as a staff is reaching out to some of our community-based organizations like the Foundation for, Southwest Florida Foundation, to try to leverage additional scholarships within our community. That's something that we've just started doing. The other piece is the whole career counseling. I mean, I think there's been a lost art there of career counseling at the high school level, and even driving it down to the 9th grade. So we're hoping to expand that. One of the things that we hope to also implement within even the Success Academy that I heard a couple of the finalists mention was the same type of structure at the Success Academy for next year would be to implement a form of career counseling.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mrs.
Yeah,
LaRiviere?
and her point, and I noticed Ms.
Oh,
Michael.
and just, I'm sorry, let me just to finish that, and I apologize. When I talk about the community-based stuff, Sarah Owens, who's with Future Makers, is actually a part of that effort that Dr. Carlin and Ms. Chandler are working to set up. So.
And I noticed that Ms. Michael has her hand up, but I don't know. This is not what we normally do. We're following, but we're meeting the needs of the students. And I think that's more important.
And that's our primary
That's our
goal.
calling. That's our
Yes,
calling.
yes.
So I don't want anybody to think, well, why don't you do that at regular meetings? Well, you guys are different.
Ms.
Very
Michael,
different.
would you have a comment?
I like that idea, and I feel like students need to be told about these scholarships. I feel like there's a lack of communication between, administration and students about these scholarships, because I know I didn't know about, scholarships such as that when I was a freshman. I didn't start looking into scholarships until this year once, I started getting accepted into colleges. So I feel like if there was a way of broadcasting that, letting students know that there are scholarships that they can be applying for right now, so they can, have that money when they need it.
That's a very good point, and I hear you about the communication. And I also, when I worked at a high school, we had a scholarship website that was created by students with the help of our local Chamber of Commerce, and I don't know if that is still available district-wide. Oh, thank you. Did you have anything else?
Yeah, I have a paper. I won't ask them all though. That'll take too much time.
But you can send them to us and we'll get you the answers.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, before you mentioned academies and how we use academies to get jobs and go into the workforce after high school, I feel as though with academies there's a lack of support. I know I'm in the Journalism Academy. I was in it for all 3 years, and I'm currently editor-in-chief of the yearbook, and my assistant editor's right there. And I know for a fact that there wasn't a lot of assistance there at all. Ms. Sowers happened to be the Journalism 1 teacher my sophomore year, and she did an excellent job. We were able to start like an online newspaper with Lehigh Gazette, and that's something that I wanted to continue, but they didn't. Like, they said that we were still able to turn in stuff, but you know, the teachers and administration didn't really advocate it. And like with yearbook, personally at my school, we have a lack of funding. We have no cameras. We all have to use our phones or our personal cameras, which is kind of takes its toll, you know, on your memory. And then there's no certification there either, so it doesn't really have any practical aspects after school, you know, besides you saying, oh yes, I was in the Journalism Academy, but you have no proof of that. And I know, like, last year, I believe, there were only 2 students who actually became certified in the welding program out of, like, 16. I don't understand how that happens when there's these students who have been working, you know, 4 years to get certified in this, yet they're not being certified.
Yes, and you bring some very good points, so I'm going to encourage you to see Mrs. Robry and perhaps Dr. Spiro on your way out. Give them your information, and I'm sure that we will get answers. And if you would be so kind as to write the rest of your questions down for us, we will take care of that.
Okay.
Okay? And I will give you my business card before you leave here, so you can contact me too. Board members, any other comments? Mrs. La Riviere?
I can either do it now or do it later, and I'll just wait and do it later. And I too will also give you my card. And I will be out there. I haven't been out there yet, out to Eastland yet this year for a visit. But we'll be out there.
Thank you very much. And your interview skills are very good, so you're off to a good start.
She's very focused.
Thank you. And next, Chris D. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, board, superintendent, fellow members. My nickname is basically the devil's advocate, so I'm going to play my role right now.
Oh, good.
I want to talk about the Chromebooks real quick. Now, you know, we have many tests online. We have FSA writing, reading, mathematics skills, but I would like to kind of understand, if not have help understanding, if we are to have our current generation of seniors, juniors, so what, of an FSA test online, you know, especially writing, which to me doesn't make sense why you would put it online, because you're supposed to be writing. But just for me, the Chromebooks, especially since I'll be getting them next year, I'm not looking forward to it because I'm not technologically advanced. I still have a flip phone. But for me, the Chromebooks kind of diminish the factor of school, you know, because I have friends with little brothers, little sisters in primary school, you know, K through 5, middle school. My girlfriend's brother has a Chromebook, and truthfully, I've seen a lot of my friends' siblings, my own girlfriend's brother, actually not get dumber, but lose the practical skills of writing, you know, in a legible font, you know, or just the everyday process of how to do long division on paper with a pencil or a pen, or even, you know, back to testing, especially of giant, you know, state tests as in the FSA writing, FSA reading, you know, I would like to see the kind of the resurrection, I could say, of old school paper and pencil for a lot of things, not just I'm sorry, but not sorry at the same time. Just I feel, especially since I will be going into the armed forces very soon, I don't want to have, especially since I want to make a career out of it, I don't want to see the fellow enlisted members coming in with a lower intelligence level than others who have come in before them, if you guys kind of understand what I'm saying. Just my thing I want to talk about is to maybe just slow it down with the progression of electronics in the school system. I understand there are very many
Thank you. Your time is up.
We'll talk tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll talk about this, right? Oh, Thursday, right. No. Oh, that's right, Thursday.
Great, Mrs. Morgan, thank you.
Okay, got it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Fox. I just want to interrupt 1 second. I always say, ask the students, and I think it's extremely important that we hear all of your opinions and get your input so that we can weigh everything that you say to help us to make decisions as we move forward. So thank you.
Oh, am I on? Okay, I would suggest that you hold a special meeting just for students so you can get a whole lot more input. And you, sir, are spot on with your comments. My main thing is in elementary school should absolutely be pencil, paper, and teachers in the elementary level. I like it. And kids, the computer is much more of a confusing, hard thing.
Excuse me, Mr. Fox. Yes, excuse me 1 second. Oh, sorry, no. Okay, please no calling out from the audience. We kind of stretched the rules a little bit this afternoon because we had students present and we wanted to give you an opportunity, but now I'm going to ask you to please not call out from the audience. Thank you. Mr. Fox, proceed.
He's absolutely right, though. I think the computers with the kids in the elementary school are far worse than sitting down and learning how to work a problem, writing a paragraph. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. The other thing was Mr. Sarah's comments about the budget created by the school district. I wanted to share that the reason that it was cut to 1% was, I think he said it was because they had some expenses that had gotten up, or I think what really happens, the tax cuts they've had the last few years have come back to bite them. And so they pass it on the school district, which is what they normally do. But what I really wanted to share with you, and I think Kathleen, you were there, was Matt Caldwell's comments on the very same subject. Was the reason they did it was because if they gave you more money, you would waste it. So by cutting the budget, it would force you to cut things that they didn't particularly like. So once again, as I always say up here, this school district is on its own, very much on its own, and I hope that it keeps that in mind when it's dealing with the public, because he's out there saying things to the general public that paint the school board in a light that it's just not true. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Okay, that concludes public comment. And now we have board member comments. Mrs. LaRiviere, do you have something this afternoon?
Well, I will just kind of address a little bit of what was shared by the students.
Thank you.
I do encourage you not just to go with questions. If you have questions, you want those questions answered. But what they need to know is this is what you need to do so you can get my peers through school and ready to graduate. And so they'll know what to do afterwards. And I really do believe that even for us with Student Advisory Committee, we need to go with them as we look at our trying to close the gap for graduation rates so that we increase those graduation rates among both minority and non-minority students. But at the same time, working with our students to help them find their passions, working with our Student Advisory Committee and other students to find out their suggestions of what we can do to help along the way. And probably for some of our students that are at risk, we need to work at it at even a lower level than high school. because we've got to work on helping them find a passion and find their gifts and their abilities. And I think that many times once they find out what those are, then they're able to move on and plug ahead. So I appreciate your coming and hearing the suggestions. Chris, right? I absolutely love Chromebooks. I absolutely love paper pencil. I taught for 31 years, and I believe in going through that developmental process, that there is an important part between that eye-hand piece that has to take place. I also know that every student learns a little bit differently and does their work differently. And along with implementing Chromebook within the classrooms, there's also that expectation that our teachers are looking at making the differentiation that they need to for those students to do just the right things. We are still teaching, cursive writing is being taught in elementary school. It's not always, it's not always carried through as the kids get older. And those of you who are saying, no, it's not, it's because you're not in elementary school right now. And maybe you weren't at an elementary school where teachers did that. For a while there was some inconsistency among the school district with regard to that. And as the same, it has to do with going through the process of long division or working out an algebra problem all the way through, not just doing it in your head. Those pieces are very, very important for all of the kids. So the Chromebooks don't take away those parts, they add to. They have helped middle schoolers to not forget their assignments for homework because they're done on the Chromebook, and so they can instantly upload it. For our middle schools, it's been great because I don't know if you have any middle schoolers that you know of, brothers or sisters or whoever, who are off the wall and can't keep track of things. It makes it easier for keeping track of things because the assignments are done on the Chromebook. And if the assignment, so that part should be taken care of in most all of their classes. But you know, I think we need to proceed very carefully. Most of my time was spent in elementary, and I believe we need to proceed very carefully within that realm and look at how we are using those pieces. But the teacher is still very much teaching in the classroom. I know the video that we saw, we didn't necessarily see a teacher instruction always taking place, but that's not necessarily, within that classroom there is still that instruction taking place. So I want to make sure that that part is very clear. And we will see what we can do about, who's the journalism teacher? Who does the? Okay. So we will see what we can do about finding somebody who might be able to fund cameras for the school. I will see if I can find somebody in the community who might be able to do something for that.
Thank you, Mrs. LaRiviere. Mrs. Morgan?
Yes, thank you guys for being here. This was terrific. And my takeaway is that I think that we probably I need to do more than visit schools. I need to visit classes. So I am very grateful to you, Millie, for inviting me, because I was at a middle school with a class last week and had a lot of fun. I haven't been in middle school in a long time. Interesting group of kids. And I am really looking forward to talking to you guys, but I'm also thinking that I have to spend more time in the schools, but not just walking around, but actually sitting in the classroom. So those of you who are staff and, you know, are looking for a way to, you have a free period, right? You know, I think you should be thinking about inviting us to come talk to the kids. So That's my comment on that. And speaking of which, speaking of funding cameras, one of the things I did want to do is a shout out today to Bridge Fund Partners, which operates primarily in the South Zone. They provide for individual requests from schools, from teachers, for specific items. They have provided funding to either a teacher, a student, or the school, Spring Creek, Bonita Springs Elementary, Bonita Springs Middle, Estero High, Three Oaks Elementary, Bonita Springs Charter, Pine Woods Elementary, San Carlos Park Elementary, Three Oaks Middle, and the Foundation for Lee County Public Schools. So there are people out there who are doing great things, both for kids and teachers and schools, and I think we need to do a better job of acknowledging that. Also, I wanted to mention that TAG, which is the a cappella group at Cypress Lake, is doing a crowdfunding to support their trip to New York City. So if anybody in the public would like to support TAG, they are doing a crowdfunding fundraiser, and there's another option for you guys to do something in your area, perhaps, for things that you need. So I think, and then I was going to ask Mr. Teuber to make certain that we have an opportunity at our next workshop or briefing to talk about the consortium meeting, because we need to firm up our schedule. I need to firm that up with your dad and talk a little bit about the structure and et cetera, so that we can start giving, I believe, who's doing it? Who's doing it on staff? Oh, Denise. Dr. Carlin is going to be working with us on that. So we need to be in a position to start giving her some direction. So that's just, Mrs. Fisher, I'll let you convey that to Mr. Teuber, if
I
you
will
would,
do that.
please.
I just made a note.
Okay. And those are my comments.
And one thing that I forgot, if it's all right.
It's all right.
I don't believe it was the last board meeting. I believe it was 2 board meetings below, the board meeting prior to the last one. I had requested that the chair work with the superintendent to organize a workshop for a tax referendum, to look at the feasibility and the pieces that they pulled together. And I don't know but I just made that request that we needed to do that, but I haven't heard anything. So I'm just putting it out there that I, for one, would like to see us at least workshop it so we have the information.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we all agreed to that.
Yeah.
So Dr. Atkins may have a comment to that. I'm going to do my comments really briefly and quickly. First of all, thank you to the students who came today. It's amazing what we can learn from you, and we thank you for taking the time and sitting here patiently to attend not only our meeting, but to share your thoughts with us. A special thanks to Bob Serra for his ongoing service to the district and for all of his support and guidance and explaining things to me this year. Appreciate it. I want to congratulate the Ida Baker High School Band for their invite to London for the 2018 New Year's Day Parade. They were visited by the Lord Mayor of Westminster, who is Winston Churchill's great-grandson, and the drum major was given an official invitation. So we're very proud of them, and their band boosters are willing to talk to anybody in the Cape Coral community who would like to support that trip. I want to send kudos to Dr. Adkins, Dr. Bohatch, our Student Services Department, and any participating schools like ALVA and ALC for implementing restorative justice practices as part of our discipline approach. The research is clear that this is a highly effective program, and I encourage you to see our district web news for a YouTube video that gives you a visual. And the amazing work done by our students in the ITV department is noteworthy. You know, when it comes to finances, we are consistently effective and efficient within our district. And due to the experience and diligence of our staff, under the leadership of Dr. Des Moore and Mr. Tubb. Sales tax referendum, sales tax. Florida does not tax food. A redeeming feature of its sales tax is if you don't spend money, you don't pay them. They generate 77% of the state's $28.4 billion general operating revenues. No other state levied tax even comes close. Equalizing school funding has saved Floridians from a lot of regional fighting over economic and racial disparities in school funding. It doesn't save us from politicians who declare themselves tax-cutting conservatives, but are just eager to shed the burden of financing public schools. There may not be a faster way to ruin Florida's economy and our children's job opportunities than skimping on school funding and financing. So, sales taxes are so popular that even Florida's local governments want in on the action. For example, Broward County is considering whether to ask residents to support a 1-cent sales tax for transportation, as is the Palm Beach County Commission, which is mulling over whether sharing the proceeds with schools and local arts will win voter support. In Tallahassee, budget negotiations commenced for the 2016-17 fiscal year with a projected and comfortable $1 billion surplus. Scott's $79.3 billion budget commendably includes a historic high spending level of $7,221 per student, a $500 increase over current spending. But we know that after listening to Mr. Serra, that's not the case now. Because the comfort level quickly plunged after legislators added up the governor's proposals. Over $1 billion in tax cuts plus $392 million in job-creating tax incentives and tourism promotions. It's all voluntary, right? No, but it seems to satisfy the constitutional standard. The program was enacted to ensure the same amount of money is spent on every child in the public school system, regardless of whether the child lives in an urban county with a large tax base, such as Broward or Palm Beach, or in a small rural county with a poor tax base. The state's shared dollars are used to equalize and increase per pupil spending. Several counties in Florida currently have sales tax for schools. It is important for us to be on solid financial ground. Sales tax could be the best way for us to get there. It can be used to pay for schools, maintenance, transportation needs, and debt reduction. Everybody pays a little, and approximately 30% could be paid by tourism. We've been discussing this at this table for 4 years now, or longer. Now it's the time for this board to move forward and stand up for our students and staff, and the tax-paying property owners, get the referendum on the ballot, and let the taxpayers decide. We really have nothing to lose. And so I'll conclude with that and then ask Dr. Atkins to respond to that in his comments, which will follow Mr. Martin if he has any comments.
None this afternoon, thank you.
Thank you. Then Dr. Atkins, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I'll address the issue at hand, which is the half-penny sales tax. First of all, and this has not been something that I have heard from this board, but I've heard from members of the public that our staff has not been working on this particular issue. That is absolutely not the case. We've been working in terms of our capital plan vigorously over the last few months that I've been here, and even prior to that, when I was in operations, one of the things that I ask operations staff to do is that in order for the community to fully understand the issue, you cannot just provide numbers on a screen, but you have to paint a very vivid picture in terms of what the actual need is within the school district. And I did not think that we had done so up until that point. So they have been working on that. And what I mean by that is for example, an opportunity for Mr. Snell, Mr. Mora, school-based staff to actually examine and look at and give you examples, including pictures of maintenance needs that we have in our school, of the capacity overcrowding issues that we have in our school, from a transportation perspective, looking at our bus fleet and so forth. So that work has certainly been going on, and Dr. Desamores has been leading that effort. And the other thing is that I think that our responsibility as a governance board and and my responsibility as a superintendent is not just to educate education that takes place in schools with students such as these, but we have to educate our public, and I don't think we have done that to this point to the degree necessary for us to be as successful as we would like to be. And let me make a point as it relates to that. It's been portrayed that we are poor stewards of our money, that we have so much debt that we cannot that we cannot possibly go ahead and move on, that we're worse than Florida or what have you. But that's simply not true. When you look at the major Florida school districts, there's only one that in terms of talking about our comparable districts, that does not use its 1.5 mil capital outlay to pay debt. That would be Pinellas. Now, there are other smaller districts that do not have the growth that we have, that are debt-free, but of the ones that we compare ourselves to, only Pinellas is one that is debt-free. And if you look at Pasco, Miami-Dade, Orange, Broward, Palm Beach, St. Lucie, Hillsborough, Collier County, and Polk, they all carry more. They use more of their capital outlay dollars to pay for debt reduction than Lee County does, even after we do this COPS initiative for the Bonita High School. After we do that, those districts will still be paying more of their 1.5 mil. We are very, very conservative in Lee County. That's a credit to Dr. Desamores, but yet our public, and I'm not besmirching our public. We haven't educated our public as to what the facts are. We have to do a better job at doing that, and I will take responsibility for that. In terms of going out with a half-penny sales tax, I think that any type of initiative, whether it's a half-penny sales tax, bond issue, or other revenue-generating activity, I think there's a couple things that's important. You have to go out in an educated manner. That means we have to understand what is the temperament of the voters today, and truly. And then the second thing is, I think we have to have time to build real community support from other governing officials, and I think that we can do that. This team right here, we all have only been together for 7 months. Exactly. Okay? This school district, I know that we've been talking about this for a number of years, but this as a school district, but this team has only been together for 7 months, and I think the public is getting behind this team, is supporting this team, but I still think that this team needs more time together. I want to be successful, and believe me, of all people. I want to make sure that we have what we need so we can provide the very best for our students. So I want to have additional revenue for our district, make no bones about it, but I also want to be successful. And as a young kid, when I was a kid, I worked beside my dad. Now, he did the lion's share of the work, mind you, but he tried to get bond issue passed after bond issue after bond issue, painting signs back in the day where you couldn't get a sign company to do it, so you had to use a template and spray paint and then go move these all over the district. I mean, he spent hours and hours and days, unsuccessful every single time. Now, your good friend Bob Evans you know, if you've heard of Bob Evans Farms, Bob Evans was the largest landholder in Gallia County, and Bob would work to knock down our efforts to be successful with passing bond issues. So as a result, the school that I went to, where I went to junior high, was built right around the turn of the century. And you talk about terrible conditions. I mean, it really was. But that didn't matter. The state of Ohio ended up having to get sued over that issue. But all that to say that it taught me even then that you have to know your constituency. Don't just go out there. It's easy to say, let the voters decide. I do think it should be the voters decide, and I think you all would agree with me. But we want to go out strategically, intelligently, with an educated strategy. And I think there are steps that we can do and are doing. We are doing this right now so that if and when we ever go out there, that we can do it and be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Mrs. Morgan?
No, Mrs. LaRiviere was first.
It doesn't matter. Regardless of when we decide to go for it and decide to move toward that end, we still need, I believe we still need to gather our troops together. We need to do something and have a plan in effect so that we can get some truth out there to our county commissioners, to our delegation team, and have some very serious talks and ask if you want to say another school district is irresponsible with their finances, please do so. But please do not necessarily include Lee County with that, because we haven't wasted money. There may be some money wasted on the school end that we don't, we can't always see all of that, where something may happen on that end. But in general, I will say we have nothing to be ashamed for, and we can easily give an account for where all of our money has gone.
Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, I think the public over the last couple of years has begun to get the fact that there's a need. So I think we can build on something there. I think when we brought this forward a year and a half ago, there was a lack of confidence that staff was ready to go ahead, so we couldn't get board buy-in to proceeding with the sales tax referendum. Now I think the problem is that the community lacks confidence in the board, not in the superintendent. I think they have confidence in this superintendent, and I think I have, based on working with Dr. Atkins, enormous confidence in the staff. I think we really do have a plan, but the reality is that the community does not have confidence in the ability of this board to work effectively as a team over a period of time that would make them feel that they would be willing to sit on the advisory committee that would be responsible for monitoring the use of the funds, that they would get behind an initial investment in putting together a campaign. I think that, I just think that it is, I think we do need partners in the community. We need political partners and we need business partners. And I think that by our own actions over the last 4 to 6 years, we have undermined it, and we have to regain it before we go out. So actually, as someone who was an advocate 2 years ago and 3 years ago for sales tax, I'm switching my position at this point, that I'm saying that, yes, we have to figure out another revenue source, but I don't think we're in a position to go out to the public, and that's because of this board.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments, and I brought this up for discussion today. I was not aware that we would have 2 board members not here, and I'm sorry about that, but I felt like it was time and important for us to begin discussion again and hear Dr. Atkins' plan.
Yep.
So thank you. Dr. Atkins.
One of the things too I want to mention is that we do have a plan to come forward and talk to you about our capital issues. So that's again another step in this journey. I know Mr. Fox and I had a discussion, so he knows one of the after the last board meeting. Okay, So he knows one of the things that we're hoping to look to do in terms of trying to get information from our constituency. I think that's a very important step. So again, I am encouraged that someday soon we'll be successful, but I want to do it at the right time. I do.
As do we all. Yeah.
If I can go on to other,
Please.
okay, I will do. There has been, we are well down the road in terms of Bonita High School and in terms of the contract, so I've been sharing that with you. Hope to bring some positive news forward soon. I do want to take this opportunity, however, to address some concerns that have, people continue to bring up as it relates to that particular site. And just to be clear and just to present facts. And so I will ask, actually, Mr. Mora, Mr. Snell to come forward. Specific, I want to talk to what we want to talk about is the site itself and the concern about asbestos on the site, and also about the preparation of the site and the readiness to put a high school there. So with that, I'd like for those two gentlemen to just take this opportunity, because I think we heard at our last board meeting, some concerns raised, and I just want to have the opportunity to address them. So if they would move forward.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin.
No.
All right. Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin. Mr. Snell and I are here to share an update of where we are with High School LLL in regards to concerns of asbestos on that property. As you probably already know, there was some due diligence made by the purchaser of that property prior to the district considering that site. We do have all of those documents in our hands, and we also have some information in regards to what we'll do moving forward to recertify those documents. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Snell to talk a little bit about what we're doing at this point.
Okay. Well, all right, here we go. Where we are right now is because there was a sale at the end of 2015 that did not go through. However, for our fortunate ability, we are able to use all of the documentation that was created in that particular process. So we didn't have to create everything from scratch, which would have cost a lot more money and also time on the schedule. So our civil engineer of record on the high school project has been reviewing all of the documentation that we received from the owner and with the previous sale. So what we have done is we've gone through those documents. They're less than 6 years old. We have reviewed everything, and we feel like that as we go through our due diligence, that the environmental or the feasibility studies that are on the existing property right now are current enough. Nothing has changed. So we're going to use that as part of the due diligence package that we have to bring forward for you. In terms of the construction piece, we talked earlier today. I talked with both our architect and civil engineer today. As far as the next phase of the land process is concerned, we will be doing borings in locations where the structures are going to be, because our next phase is to determine what type of soil is there as far as the constructability of the structures, so that we can plan all of our structural engineering in relationship to the buildings. All of the in our view, all of the due diligence as far as the property itself in regards to this particular issue with the asbestos has already been done, has already been cleared, has already been certified. You're going to hear a lot of people throw out some other stuff. It's simply not true. At the end of the day, this is all about science and facts and what is actually there. And then when you examine all of the data that we've gone through, and I've got tons of reports right here from everything that was done, that when you read that and read the scientific data, the site is clean. The site is ready to have a school built on it if we go through with the purchase. And you're going to hear all kinds of stuff. But we feel like from our professional perspective of everybody that we have talked to, we have a wonderful site to build on. It's clean, and it will fit the Triple L High School.
Just to give you a little bit of background information in regards to the site and the asbestos that was abated, the Imperial Parkway site is 76 acres. The area that was abated was less than 2 acres. The abatement was performed by American Management Resources Corp. Under contract with Posen Construction. That project was completed in April 5th, 2010. The area was retested and there was no asbestos found. The material that was in the area in question was aggregate comprised partially of cementatious pipe that was dumped there. 166 truckloads of debris were taken from that site and put into the Okeechobee landfill. And during the process, all of the federal regulations and state regulations for removal of asbestos was followed. So at this particular time, as Reggie mentioned, all of the documentation that we have states that that site is asbestos-free, and we are recertifying that at this point.
You know, one of the interesting things that Mr. Snell brought up about, during the abatement process is that there was air testing that went on literally while this process was being was taking place. So this wasn't like you do the abatement and let all this stuff go flowing all over the as is being portrayed and painted. That we do a lot of asbestos abatement as we do, like for example, Tice was the last example that I can recall. In fact, I was just talking about emailing back and forth with Mr. Dobson and Mr. Law about Dunbar Community School, and if we put some cameras there, there's asbestos in Dunbar Community School where you potentially have to do some abatement. It's just a reality that we live with in this society where we used it as an insulating material. So this is, I was impressed by some of the measures, the extraordinary measures that were taken to address a very small area on this site, but unfortunately not surprised by the reaction of some. So anyways, go ahead. Gentlemen, I just wanted to mention that because you had brought it up this afternoon, and I thought it was a very good point.
Well, the one thing that when you get into a situation like this, there are both state and federal regulations that you have to follow, and these are monitored. As you look through the report and see that the Lee County DEP made multiple visits to the site during this process, so did the City of Bonita Springs people, the Lee County Natural Resources also made visits to the site during the abatement. So, and then just look at the detailed records that are required to be kept in a situation like this, along with pictures. You look at the area that was involved here, less than 2 acres of the 76-acre site. Dr. Atkins, I don't know if you passed out this yet, but we have a handout that shows where this site, where this area of abatement was. The current projection right now on the site design is that a parking lot will cover this area where the rock was placed on the site by Posen Construction 8-9 years ago. So when you look at all the reports and you look at how the abatement was managed and then cleared, there's one interesting comment in some of the email information that we got, and we got tons of information from everybody involved in this process so that we could make a valid decision, is that DEP at the end of this basically didn't really put it into their files because this abatement didn't meet their requirements as a major event. So you may have people go and say, well, DEP doesn't have anything on this. Well, the reason they don't have anything on this, and we have this in writing and communications with the DE people, is they didn't consider this to be a major event. And everything that was done in this particular process was a landowner defending his right of owning the land, of making the appropriate people clean this up. And that's what it was boiled down to.
Mrs. Morgan.
Yeah, I guess for Dr. Adkins, is there any way we can make like a timeline or a federal regulation, a state regulation, a local city, a county, and just put it up on the website, put the documentation up on the website, or put a link to the documentation on the website? So when we get these emails, we can tell people, go to the document. If you have a question, then come to us. But we're getting people asking us these questions. If there's some way to just make it all public and then let them come back with a challenge to what's there, I think it would make our lives a little bit easier.
We can certainly do that.
That would make sense.
We have the timelines from the reports of the abatement and what took place, and it's actually almost by day, by hour of the day, and if you put the report up on the website, I think that's full disclosure. Everything is out in the open. Nothing has been hidden in this process at all, like I said earlier, this is all about the science. And tonight, actually at the board meeting tonight, we have asked the president of the abatement company to come to the meeting tonight because he's the professional and he can tell you all the ins and outs about this process, because as with anything, I think asbestos is one of those things that is like the boogeyman under your bed. It doesn't... Everybody's scared of it, but most of the time it's not there. This is a natural occurring element, as Dr. Atkins informed me earlier today from his scientific days. It is something that every precaution was taken during this process to make sure that it was not spread into other areas.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really all the comments I have today.
Okay. Seeing no other business to come before this board, I will first mention that at 5:45 we'll reconvene for a student performance, and at 6 o'clock we'll have our board action meeting. And now, seeing no other business to come before this board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.